Good evening, everyone. Allison Schaberg here. We're going to go ahead and get started. We still have people coming in. I am Allison Schaberg, and I am with Adda, also ADDA, which is the Attention Deficit Disorder Organization, and it's based out of Houston. It was formed in 1987. So this is the support group. We typically meet the last Tuesday of every month. We've been meeting online by Zoom since the pandemic. We used to meet in person, so that has changed a little bit. But tonight, what we're talking about is transition and tips for launching your special needs teen into adulthood. And when we have these meetings, so although we're here and we're representing Adda tonight, we recognize that there are a lot of people that attend our meetings where their kids have comorbid conditions, and maybe some are attending that don't have ADD or ADHD at all. They have other disabilities. And so I just wanted to say, if you're wondering, you're in the right place. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So tonight, we can't see you and we can't hear you. Your cameras and your microphones are muted, but we definitely do want to hear from you. So as we're going through this presentation, please put your questions in the chat box, and we're going to answer just as many of them as we can. We are recording tonight's session, so post-meeting tomorrow, you guys will get an email with this recording. We'll also put the slides out to you as well in a PDF in case there's any links or anything that you want to refer back to. So as it relates to the ADDA support group, this was founded in 1987 by Pam Esser in the greater Houston area, and there's chapters all over the state of Texas. It costs $40 a year to join the organization. We're never pushers of joining, but the mothership of the organization can certainly use our support. They put out annual conferences and a whole bunch of wonderful information. Their conferences have great speakers that come in from all across the country, not just the state. So if you are not familiar with the organization, I hope that you will check that out. That will also be in the email that we send out with this recording and the PDF of how to join the organization and a little bit more information about that. So tonight's topic on transition, we are going to talk about a lot of information tonight. And transition is something that we refer to or we hear as a buzzword all of the time with our kids that have disabilities. And what we're talking about is tonight, basically what we're talking about is transitioning into adulthood, things that maybe should be on your radar from an educational perspective, things that you maybe should be considering as it relates to their disability, their level of disability, and other things that they may qualify for. So if you have a question, probably somebody else has that question, so don't be shy. Definitely put it in the chat box. And I come to you as a parent, so I am a parent to 4, and I have 2 kids with special needs. I have one that has transitioned into adulthood and one that is in the process of transitioning. And we really put out a lot of webinars on a pretty regular basis. We do have a YouTube channel, Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel that has just a whole bunch of topics regarding transition and special needs planning. So any of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, there's probably an entire webinar dedicated to that one specific topic. So if that is more relevant to you and your journey, you can check that out on the YouTube channel. So first things first, when it comes to transitioning, I think that it's really, really important for us to set realistic expectations when it comes to transitioning. Understanding what those diagnoses are, the challenges and the strengths. Some of our kids, as it relates to ADD, ADHD, from a maturity level, they may be 18 years old, but from a maturity level, they may be functioning on a 14 or a 15-year-old level, sometimes lower. So sometimes, our kids really aren't ready for maybe what the traditional path might be. So really looking at what that where your child is, where they're standing from an educational standpoint, where they're standing from a social standpoint, and interacting with others. But first things first, we want to say it's okay to consider a non-traditional path. We really want you to just think about those things that might be a good fit for your child, because I think that we live in this world of comparisons that starts early. And I kind of liken it to, like, for instance, all the years ago when you got married, you're at your wedding and somebody says, well, when are you going to have kids? You're at the hospital, you're having your first child, and somebody's going to say, when are you going to have another one? Where the kids start kindergarten, all the kids are doing dance, or they're all doing baseball. We're always comparing and when the child did whatever. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it really, really doesn't matter, those comparisons. And sometimes we're putting our kids in boxes where they're, I hate to use the word destined to fail, but that they can't keep up, and they're always feeling that they're behind, or they're less than in some of those things. So some of the things to keep them open mind about, consider delaying a driver's license. Depending on some of those diagnoses, I understand that there might be people attending tonight that their child will never drive, and that's okay. And others, we have concerns. We want our child to be able to drive. Maybe they're not there yet. So delaying that driver's license. And one thing that I would like to mention here, so if this is on your radar, you'd like your child to be able to drive, but maybe they are really ADHD, or they do have processing speed delays or working memory issues, or some of the other concerns that you might have as it relates to driving. There are two programs, and I know we probably have people all over the state that are on tonight, but there's two programs that I'm aware of that are in the greater Houston area. They're really in the Woodlands, but the Miller Driving Rehab, Strawmat Driving Rehab, and Tier Memorial Herman, they all have assessments that you can do with them to see if your child has what it takes to be behind the wheel safely, okay? And then they also have behind the wheel training. The Miller Driving Rehab and Strawmat Driving Rehab have behind the wheel training for our kids that is focused on individuals with a disability. Think about parents or grandparents or somebody that maybe has had a stroke in the past and then they started driving again. It's the same kind of testing to see if they have the reflexes, if they have what they need to be able to stay focused behind the wheel. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention out there. These programs are not your normal behind the wheel programs. Most of your behind the wheel training programs, the instructors are not nuanced with kids with disabilities. If you happen to find a driving school where you do have someone, then that's great, and that's going to be cheaper than some of these driving rehab programs. I would say that these driving rehab programs are behind the wheel. You could expect that it's probably going to cost about $3,500, and it's typically not covered by insurance. So I just wanted to put that out there. So we want you to think about trade schools, community college. There are 18 plus programs that might be a good factor, something to factor in as it relates prior to going to the university or the community college if they're not quite there yet. Just because they're not quite there yet doesn't mean that they're never going to be there. So just think about some of those things, maybe a reduced college course load. Typically a full college course load, what they're looking at is 12 hours, but maybe consider getting their feet wet with some college courses. Maybe it's a community college, maybe it's one or two, maybe you try one first and then you add another one and kind of see how things go. And we also want you to think about living at home versus on campus. There are a lot of temptations at the university level and living away. And for our kids that may not be there yet from a maturity level, these are all things that are worth considering. And we really like to say, they are where they are. They're not behind. They are where they are, and helping them get to where they're going, even if it's much later, it's not that traditional, age 18 and off to the university. It's really, really okay. So when it comes to this, it's about finding a good fit. The schools, colleges, extracurricular activities, career path, and work setting. All of these things might be, as you're considering what those options are for transition, all of those might be on your plate, and they might be in opposite order. Maybe they go to work first, maybe they work on a career path. One of the things that we want to encourage, and we've seen a lot more of this with the pandemic, was, that kids are graduating from high school and they're coming home because they're not signed up for a transition program. They're not signed up for a community college or the university. They don't have any extracurricular activities. So a little bit of advanced planning in that arena will prevent that from happening because we're seeing with those comorbid conditions, the anxiety, depression, some of the other things that we see that go along with ADD, ADHD, those are definitely on the rise when there's not a good path forward. So one of the big things that I found pretty interesting as we were transitioning my adult daughter is those accommodations in the public school, in the private school, they don't just automatically transfer to the university or the community college. So planning early for accommodations. So if your child is getting accommodations in any of the school settings that they're in right now, you want to make sure if they're moving on to the community college or the university that they're going to be getting those necessary accommodations with the school that they're going to. So first things first, most of these, one of the things that I found frustrating is that none of the universities or the community college have the same criteria. The rules are different for every single school. So if you're applying to multiple schools, you're going to want to know what the rules are for each one of those schools. There has been some relaxation in some of these requirements because of the pandemic, because it's been harder to have testing. Most of these schools are going to want updated testing within the last 3 to 5 years. I'm talking about learning disability, neuropsych testing, those IQ scores. These tests are typically done by your psychologist or by a testing person that's, associated with a psychology office or psychiatry office. Some of the other places, sometimes the public school will do some of this testing. I would say that is far less frequent than the private pay for the testing. When it comes to the SAT and the ACT, those accommodations, again, you don't just automatically qualify for SAT and ACT accommodations. You have to prove with your testing that those accommodations are needed, and you're going to have to apply for those accommodations through the College Board for SAT and then ACT through their website. If you type in the search bar, once you're on their website and you say accommodations, they're going to take you to a page and you're going to be able to download the forms to request those accommodations. If your child is in the public school, you can work with the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor can help apply for accommodations as well. Sometimes the SAT and the ACT and getting those accommodations back can take a period of time. So you're going to want to apply for those early. So what I want to say on the SAT and the ACT is, again, each of these colleges and universities are different in what they're requiring. Most of the community college doesn't require the SAT or the ACT. They're going to require the TSI, which is the Texas Success Initiative. That is going to be testing on reading, writing, and math. And they need to pass each one of those categories. And you could pass one and not the other, but they need to pass each one of those categories to be able to take classes in that area of study. So if your child is planning on going to the community college first, not the university, it is not necessary to put them through the stress of the SAT and the ACT. If you have kids with test anxiety or kids that just in particularly test poorly, what I suggest in that regard is that you can work with your community college. You can look up online. There are Texas Success Initiative training programs, like online training programs. There's free ones, and there are ones that you can buy that will help them get ready for the reading, writing, and math sections of the TSI. But the main thing is check your requirements early, be able to provide those documents to the offices of disability of the schools that you're going to be working with. Each of these schools have an office of disability. Offices of disability are not created equally. So just like all of the other requirements, they're not necessarily the same. It's the same with the Office of Disability. So when you're making your list of schools that might be appropriate for your child that learns differently, one of the first stops that I would make is interviewing and understanding the who the Office of Disability is, who they serve, how big are they, what are the tools and resources that they have at their disposal, because some offices of disability have lots of tools, such as audiobooks, voice-to-text recognition software, just all kinds of stuff that is provided by the school. Smaller offices of disability may not have those software available to students, and it would be something that you would have to pay for out of pocket. So that is a big first and foremost, is familiarize yourself with the Office of Disability. One of the other things that we want to talk about is if they're going to work, reasonable accommodation is required if it does not pose undue hardship. And you can look at the Department of Labor. There are a multitude of registered internships for apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships for kids with disabilities. So if your child is not necessarily a fit to go to higher education right now, there are all kinds of apprenticeships out there that are registered and that are designed for individuals with disabilities. So you might want to check that out, and you can check that out on the Department of Labor as well. So another thing and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but there are a lot of programs out there through the state of Texas. Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehab, that is one of them. Some of you may have heard of Vocational Rehab. So that is a program that is really designed for kids with disability. It can start as early as from 14 to 22. There are also programs called PREETS, and that's ETS, I'm saying PREETS, which is pre-employment training services that are available. That's through the Workforce Solutions. So there's Workforce Commission and there's Workforce Solutions. There's also programs called Summer Earn and Learn. So all of these programs, Texas Workforce Commission, Summer Earn and Learn, PREETS, most of the public schools throughout the state of Texas have a liaison for these programs. And they're not an employee of the school. There's somebody who works for the Texas Workforce Commission that they will work with your students. And the whole premise behind these programs, which I will tell you are really funded, they have a lot of money. They have grants and other things available, and they need to spend it. So these are programs that are designed to help individuals that have a disability that may have an impediment to employment to find and maintain gainful employment, okay? So if you're thinking of going the work route, there are so many resources out there for you, for your student, that don't cost you money. And I will also mention, when we were talking about this updated testing for accommodations like these neuropsych testing, oftentimes if your student is working with vocational rehab, they will do a lot of this testing as a part of determining what are the deficits or the impediments to employment and how do we close that gap. So a lot of times this testing that could be $3,500 to $5,000 out of pocket, if you do it on your own in the local community, it could be covered completely 100% by some of these programs that I'm mentioning. So some of these, and we always say that we're not affiliated with them and they're not affiliated with us, but some of these are some of the programs post high school options that are available out there. So now there is traditional, just going traditionally to the community college or going traditionally to the university, and just working with the Office of Disability and having accommodations. But then there are other programs out there specifically for maybe an autism brain or someone who has intellectual disabilities. And when we're doing webinars like this, we're serving people all across the board. Some of our kids are academically gifted and talented, and they have, other frontal lobe issues and things like that, but they're academically gifted. And some of them have intellectual disabilities and learning disabilities as well. So what we say about these programs, this is just a few of them. We do have a whole spreadsheet and a whole, PDF of some other programs out there as well. But look at these programs, look what's out there. Everything is in Texas for the exception of Lynn University. Lynn University is in Florida. They're very well known for working with individuals with disability. But all of these other programs are either programs that are specifically for intellectual disabilities, or they are specifically known at their school for having a good Office of Disability and working with students with disabilities. So what I'll say here is that you're going to want to research this early and start your spreadsheet of, what programs you might be most interested in. So although these programs exist, they don't have unlimited enrollment. They may only have a few seats, each year that they're filling. So you want to be aware of what is the application, what date does the application open up? When should you apply? When are they going to, make the announcement of who they've accepted? And you may want to apply for multiple programs while you're at it, because you're not necessarily guaranteed that your student is going to get into that particular program. But so the key thing is plan early, make your spreadsheet, know your deadlines, and just remember when I'm telling you that every single one of these schools have different deadlines. It would be so nice. I was thinking when I was going through this process of how nice it would be if couldn't we just say that all Texas schools have this application date and this is what we have to do to prove disability for their offices of disability? But I can only wish, I guess. One of the things that I like to mention here, and I like to have people be aware of, is Bloom Consulting. If you're taking notes, you're going to want to put this down. You're going to want to check out their website. Bloom Consulting does a multitude of things, but they have good programs designed to support your neurodiverse college students. It's basically a wraparound program, and they have a connections coach, and they do mentoring and guidance and navigational support, and it gives you the opportunity to take a step back as a parent, because I don't know about you, but some of our teens don't like our advice, or they don't think we're as smart as they used to think when they were 4. But anyway, but sometimes when there's somebody else that is working with them and kind of pushing them along and holding them accountable and kind of moving them towards, self-advocacy, it's a good thing. So this program is it's $1,000 per month, which might sound expensive. Some of these other programs that I'm familiar with are like $56,000 a year. So this $1,000 a month is pretty affordable. But Bloom Consulting, they also have the ability to do a vocational evaluation for your student. The vocational evaluation is also something that you might be able to get covered through the vocational rehab program as well. But just check them out. Look at their Campus Connections program. Look at some of the different programs they have. You can go through Bloom Consulting as a private pay family, or you can also end up with Bloom Consulting through vocational rehab. So either one, they're definitely worth checking out. And they do a lot of webinars and educational events as well. So you might want to see if they have any that are upcoming that might be relevant to you and your student. So as it relates to special needs planning, one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, it's not, when we're talking about transitioning, and especially when we're talking about kids that have multiple disabilities, some of you have maybe never thought about some of the things that they may qualify for, or that you maybe should be on your radar or you should consider. We talk to families all of the time with kids with disability, and one of the things that we hear on a pretty regular basis is, I'm still hopeful and optimistic. I don't know yet. I hope that my student can live independently. If I was judging right now, maybe the answer is no, but I'm still hopeful and optimistic. So all of these things need to be on your radar, because if you don't know that you know that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that your child is going to be able to function and live independently, there are some steps as parents that you're going to need to take as it relates to special needs planning for your loved ones. So first things first, one of the things that we talk about here is that we want you to work with a special needs planner. Your situation is special. If you have a child with a disability, that is a completely different special situation, comparatively speaking to our kids that don't have disabilities. A special needs planner, they're typically certified in as a National Social Security advisor. They're typically members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and all of those things are important as you're planning for your future because they're nuanced in these things. It is very, very important if we have kids that could possibly need care for the rest of their life or have some form of care needs. It's very, very important that we have money in the right buckets. We know what to do, when to do, and how to do it, because we want to preserve their eligibility for benefits in the future, and I'm going to talk about those. But when it comes to planning, we want you to gather all of your necessary planning documents. What does this look like? This is all things as it relates to financial, insurance, life insurance, disability, long-term care insurance that you have in place, any investment statements that you have, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, 401ks, 403bs. This is Social Security statements for you and your spouse or the child's father if you happen to be in a divorce situation. These are some of the planning documents. These are all going to be necessary as it relates to future benefits that your child may qualify for through the Social Security Administration. And like I said, we're going to talk about that in a minute. We also want you to consider developing a letter of intent. So again, I recognize that there are people here tonight that maybe your primary diagnosis is ADHD, and that's it. There's nothing else. But a lot of our families that we work with, they have multiple diagnoses with their kids. And what a letter of intent is really we like to call it a family love letter. This is if something happened to you, okay, this is not a will, this is not a legal document. This is if something happened to you or your spouse, the caregiver of these kids with disabilities. If I was stepping in, okay, if something happens to you and I was stepping in, this document, I could pick up and understand everything about your child, what makes them go, what makes them fall apart, what are their primary diagnoses, who are their doctors, what medications do they take, what are their allergies, what are their religious preferences, all things related to your child, where were they born, birth certificate, that kind of stuff. That's what's in the letter of intent. And oftentimes, and it sounds unnecessary, we've actually created a template for a letter of intent that has, it's actually 20 pages long. But if you have a child that has more severe needs that honestly you don't sit around and talk about because it's just your life and it's just what you do, but could somebody else just do that or just pick up where you left off? And the answer is no. You really should have a letter of intent. And also, I would say once you complete your letter of intent, it's important to share that. Either complete it with a spouse or share it with a spouse. If you are a caregiver or the primary caregiver for your loved one with a disability, you'd be surprised of the things that maybe even a person living in your same household doesn't know. And it's not because they're disengaged, it's just because everybody has different roles. Maybe one person works, one person does the caregiving, that kind of thing. So go over it with your spouse. And then if you have a future caregiver that would step in if both you and your spouse were gone or you and the other child's parent is gone, then you're going to want to share this letter of intent with that person as well. But we also want you to spend some time of formulating your vision on how you hope things will look for your special needs child. But also while you're doing that, and I think it's very, very important to consider how you want things to look for yourself and your own retirement. So as caregivers, we're often focusing on how we can help our kids, how we can deal with the current crisis. There's so many things, and we're so often not really looking at our own future in retirement and what does that look like. There has to be balance. So if you happen to be here tonight and you do have a child that might possibly need care for the rest of their life or for an extended period of time while they're getting where they're going, think about balance, because I think that that's really, really important. And that's one of the things that we see that is often forgotten, that balance for the parents, the balance of the parents. You work 25, 35 years in the workplace to enjoy your retirement. And if you're going to have a child that might need care for the rest of their life or for an extended period of time, you've got to have balance with that. And if you don't, what we see is that the caregiver's health fails. Their own mental health fails, their own physical health fails, and you can't be the caregiver that you had hoped to be. So that's why it's so important to look at that there. So some of the questions that we have that come up, and this may or may not be relevant to you depending on, the level of the diagnosis that your child has, is who's going to care for my child when I'm gone? What if I am gone? So developing a future care plan now will answer these questions. So if you have a child that may, have a longer path to adulthood or independence, thinking about some of these things may be relevant to you. There are programs. There's a ton. Again, we don't work for them. They don't work for us. There are a ton of programs out there that are really for transitioning kids. Some are for more lower functioning. Some are for higher functioning. There are semi-independent living communities for kids with disability, for kids with ADHD, where they live in kind of like an apartment, kind of an inclusive apartment setting, but they have help. So they feel good. They're kind of living semi-independently. They're not living under your roof. There's all kinds of programs out there like that. But if you have a child that you feel or beyond a shadow of a doubt they will need care for the rest of their life, consider, touring some of the different facilities out there: Brookwood, Marbridge, Daymark Living. There's a whole list. We have a PDF list of the different programs, depending on, where your child is. The severity of their disabilities will depend on what might be a good fit for them. Waiting lists for these facilities can be 5 years or longer. Some of these facilities are private pay, and some of them will accept waivers. Fewer of them accept waivers in the state of Texas. One of the things, I'm not even sure this is actually on this presentation, but I want to mention this to you. If your child has a disability, it is important that you sign them up for the Texas waivers. In the state of Texas, there are a number of waivers, and the point behind the waivers is to waive off the cost of care to prevent a child from being in a residential facility in the future. The waiting list for these waivers in the state of Texas is long. I hear 10 years, I hear 15 years. I've known people that were on the list for as many as 18 years. But I think the important thing is to get your child on the list. And on our YouTube channel, the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, there is an entire presentation on waivers, how to get on the list, what waivers you should apply for. The qualification for the waivers is determined at the time that they come up on the list, not at the time that you put their name on the list. So it costs you nothing to put your child on the list. And there is so if you're taking notes, there is the HCS, Home and Community-Based Service Waiver. There's the Texas Home Living. There is Community First Choice. There is the Class Waiver. And another waiver, so all of those waivers have very long waiting lists, so that's why you want to get your child on there. Most of the qualifications for those are intellectual disability with an IQ below 70, and that might not be a fit for your child right now, But again, it's based off of when they come up on the list, not now. So get them on the list. But one waiver I want to talk to you guys about, and we have had a presentation on this before, is the YES waiver. This is Youth Empowerment Services in the state of Texas. There's typically not a waiting list for the YES waiver, and I'm YES. You can Google that. The YES waiver is a wraparound program for kids with basically mental health challenges. Diagnosis is to include ADHD, anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, to name a few. Some of the kids, maybe they've had issues at school, maybe they've been in trouble with the law, maybe they've run away, any of the ODD, any of those other, there's so many acronyms that they throw around out there, but the YES waiver is a wraparound program. There is no waiting list for that. So if you have a child that is struggling in some of those areas, that is a waiver that you can qualify for. It's not based off of your income. You don't make too much money. It's not based off of your income and assets. It's based off of the child's. So that may be something that you want to consider as well. So the other thing that we like to talk about is if you have a child that's going to need care, post 18, after you're gone, make careful considerations before naming a sibling as a future caregiver. Where this might work is when siblings have a 15 or a 20-year age difference. That might work. But oftentimes there is an obligatory yes from a sibling saying, when a parent says, well, you're going to take care of Johnny if something happens to me, there's that obligatory yes. But that your other child has hopes and dreams. They want to go to college. They want to have a house. They might want to get married. They might want to have kids. They may have their plate full with their own children and things like that. And so we always just say, really, really consider that before you do that. Now, we know that there's a love of family and families stick together and all of those things. But what we like to see those siblings as is a future trustee of a trust that's going to fund care for your loved ones, and developing that future care plan is going to kind of establish that. Now, what if your situation is, I don't know if my child is going to need care for the rest of their life, so I don't know if I need a future care plan. What we suggest there is that you plan for the worst and hope for the best. And when the best happens, your retirement is simply a lot more lucrative, right? That's all there is to it. So, having a future care plan is not planning gloom and doom or anything like that. It's just being proactive to make sure that there is the right amount of assets set aside if your child is going to need ongoing care in the future. Some of the other comorbid conditions, we do see autism and ADHD. Those are some of the things that we've seen on a pretty regular basis. Some of there is a higher prevalence of psychiatric disorders with those dual diagnoses. And again, we're talking about anxiety, depression, borderline, bipolar, all of those things. And between 18 and 22, even sometimes schizophrenia. So these are all things that we're not planning on, and that's not our hope and our goal, but just kind of keeping those things in mind, that the comorbid conditions that go along with ADHD, there are very few people that have ADHD or ADD and nothing else. So I think we just have to keep those in mind. Okay. So this is an important topic that we're going to talk about, and one that you may not necessarily be familiar with that much. What we want to do is we want to preserve the eligibility for your child for state and federally funded programs. First things first, I want to talk about SSI and Medicaid. So typically, most people have not qualified for SSI and Medicaid prior to their child turning 18. It is based off of the parents' assets, their income. And most families do not qualify for SSI and Medicaid. So even though your child may be disabled because of the financial, looking at the parent's income, your child doesn't qualify. So depending on the diagnosis of your child, it is highly possible. If your child just has ADHD and basically that's it, they're probably not going to qualify for SSI and Medicaid. But if they've got a lot of those other comorbid conditions going on, like I was talking about, they need to apply for SSI and Medicaid when they turn 18. Okay, so once they turn 18, the magic age, this transition age of 18, the means-based test that the Social Security Administration does is based off of the child's assets, not the parents. So in this regard, it is important that the child does not have more than $2,000 in assets to their name. If they have more than $2,000 assets to their name, they're not going to qualify for SSI and Medicaid. Right now, it's considered substantial gainful amount. So the Social Security Administration has something that they call substantial gainful amount. So basically what they say is if your child is earning the substantial gainful amount or more, then they're simply not disabled. That amount for 2021 is $1,310 gross per month, $1,310 gross per month. For 2022, that amount is $1,350 gross per month, okay? So if your child has a disability, even if they're working, if they're making less than that $1,310 per month for 2021 or $1,350 per month gross for 2022, then they can still qualify for SSI and Medicaid. Now, the SSI for 2021 is $794 a month. There was a 5.94 increase for 2022, which I think was the largest in 40 years for the Social Security Administration. So SSI for 2022, the amount is $841 per month. So SSI and Medicaid go together, okay? Why is this important? Because some families say, we don't need SSI. I mean, this is nothing. $794 a month, are you kidding me? We don't need this. It's too much of a headache. I think that the key is the Medicaid, and I think that the other key is that what you're establishing is that your child's disability started prior to age 22. So this is super important, and write this down. The Social Security Administration, there are programs available for your child to be under a parent's record if their disability started prior to age 22. So that's the key age. And even if your child is over 22 and you haven't applied, you can still apply as long as their disability started prior to age 22. So SSI and Medicaid, SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. That is a means-based program for the indigent disabled. Social Security, disability, Social Security, and Medicare, that is a worker-based program. So as a worker, every quarter that we work, we're paying into Social Security. So one day when we retire, we're going to get retirement benefits through the Social Security Administration, or if we become disabled prior to retiring, we're going to get disability benefits through the Social Security Administration. So here's the cool thing about this and why this might matter to you. If your child's disability started prior to age 22, your child can be counted under a parent's record for disability purposes, okay? So as I mentioned, Social Security is worker-based. Some of our kids may never work. That's not our hope. That's not our plan, but they may never work. So if they never work, then does that mean that they'll never get Social Security? And generally the answer would be yes, because they don't pay into the system. So there is no retirement for them. But being able to be considered as a disabled adult child under a parent's record is going to allow them to piggyback off of a parent's record, and they can qualify for disability in the future. So here's how this works. Your child, if they're a disabled adult child under a parent's record, they will be entitled to 50% of you or the other parent's benefit. So for example, if dad's benefit is $3,000 a month, Johnny's benefit will be $1,500. Once dad turns his Social Security on, Johnny's going to be eligible for RSDI, 50% of dad's record, In that example, Dad being $3,000, Johnny's going to be $1,500. And after 2 years, Johnny's going to be eligible for Medicare. So in that example, the SSI will stop. He'll still be eligible for Medicaid. He'll start getting that RSDI, the disability benefit, and then in 2 years, he'll be eligible for Medicare. So dual eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. So that, I know that was a mouthful and it was probably a lot of information, but I think it's important to know, because I think a lot of families that we work with, when they have kids that have ADHD and other mental health diagnoses, they don't necessarily think that they're disabled. And maybe along the lines, as once these kids start working, they start getting fired, they start having issues in the workplace, they can't maintain a job, they can't show up to work. Some of the impulsive things that some of our ADHD brain kids do cause that disability. So I just really wanted to spend some time talking about that. So other ways that we're going to fund care for our kids in the future, there's two places that you can have money. I like to call them baskets or buckets, that you can have money that is not going to count against you for SSI and Medicaid. One is a special needs trust. So a special needs trust is the right way to leave money to a special needs child for their future care and not cause them to disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. So a special needs trust. This is a third-party special needs trust. You can have an unlimited amount of money in that trust. We have people that have millions of dollars in their trust. We have people that fund their special needs trust with life insurance. So basically, the parents have a life insurance contract on their own life, and the beneficiary is the special needs trust. So when the parent passes away, the life insurance proceeds go into the special needs trust, and it does not disqualify the child from any benefits that they might be getting through Social Security or SSI. Another place that you can have money is an ABLE account, and it's not counted against you for SSI and Medicaid. An ABLE account is organized under the tax code 529A. You guys have probably heard of 529C for college. 529A is for ABLE, and it's about achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. You can put $15,000 a year into an ABLE account, and what you can pay for out of an ABLE account. So it acts similar like a 529C as far as the free withdrawals for qualified things and no taxes and that kind of thing. It acts similar that way. But the thing is, with an ABLE account, is you can pay for it out of an ABLE account if it can be construed as achieving a better life with an individual with a disability. So if you have a child that may or may not go to college, an ABLE account might be appropriate, because an ABLE account can pay for college, but it can pay for transition programs, it can pay for vacations, iPhones, computers, all of these things that can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, including rent or mortgage payments. So a special needs trust cannot pay for monthly rent or mortgage payments, but an ABLE account can. So one of the things, if you're not sure if your child is going to college and you have a 529C plan for them, you may want to consider converting $15,000 a year over into an ABLE account for them, because that way you'll be able to get money out of the ABLE account and not pay penalties like you would for a 529C for taking it out of a 529C for other expenses other than higher education. So I want to just take a pause just for a second. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I know we've kind of talked about a lot so far. So I just wanted to invite you, if you have questions so far and kind of some of the things that we've talked about, please do put your questions in the chat box. We definitely want to cover them. So Social Security Blue Book, write this down. This is important. You can go to the Social Security Blue Book. On the Social Security website, there's something called the Social Security Blue Book. And basically what this is an impairment guide. And it's the guide that the Social Security workers use to determine if your child is disabled or not. So, and they categorize this blue book by, it might be neurological conditions, mental health conditions, cardiac conditions, cancer, those types of things. So all of the diagnoses that your child has, you're going to want to look those up in the blue book before you apply for SSI. First things first, make sure they don't have $2,000 in their name. Second thing, make sure they're not earning more than $1,350 essentially a month gross. And then you're going to want to look up all of the conditions that your child has in the blue book, and it is going to tell you exactly what it is that you have to prove to the Social Security Administration to prove that your child is disabled. So what I suggest from there, once you have looked at that, I suggest looking at your PCP's records for your child. Are those records correct? Okay. Do they correctly depict what the diagnoses are, what the impairments are, what the medications are, et cetera? When I did this for my own daughter, some of the records were wrong. And I was really glad that I looked at it. There's errors in medical records all the time. I was glad that I looked at it before we applied, because it didn't paint a clear picture, and I was able to talk to the doctor and she was able to correct it. I mean, it was just a few corrections, but we definitely do recommend that you kind of look at those things. You're also going to want to gather names, address, phone numbers of all of the doctors that your child sees, the PCP, if they go to a neurologist, psychologist, psychiatrist, any of those doctors, you're going to want to have a list of all of those. You're going to want to have a list of all of those medications as well. Okay, let me see. I've got a couple of questions here. Are there any disadvantages for an ABLE account? In other words, is it a use it or a lose it scenario? No. It's not a use it or a lose it scenario. Well, let's talk about that. That's actually a good question. So it's not really a use it or lose it scenario like each year, like some of those flexible spending accounts or something like that. You can put $15,000 a year into an ABLE account. You cannot have more than $100,000 in an ABLE account before you disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. So no more than $100,000. So that is a reason why sometimes you need a special needs trust and an ABLE account, because you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, but you can only have up to $100,000 in an ABLE account. So your question is a really great question, because one of the caveats or an issue that can be with an ABLE account is that there is a Medicaid payback on an ABLE account. So what that means is the ABLE account is in the person with the disability's name. Okay, it's in their name, and if that individual passes away, their Medicaid has the right to come in and get a payback for the benefits that they have paid over the time. And any remaining assets that are in that account would go to the estate of the deceased, is how that would work. So we don't typically see people lose it because there's just not a whole lot of money in there. And also, just because you can put $15,000 a year in there doesn't mean that you have to. So if $15,000 a year is going to cover rent, then I would do the $15,000 a year. If you have lower expenses, like put in what you're going to try to take out every year, right? To pay for those qualified expenses. Some people have up to $100,000 in there, but other people keep the balance a little bit lower, and then they keep more money in the special needs trust. So what I want to talk about the special needs trust, the third-party special needs trust, there is no Medicaid payback on that, okay? But again, the key with the special needs trust is you cannot pay for rent or monthly housing expenses. The deal behind SSI is it's designed to pay for food and shelter, okay? So food and shelter is the deal behind SSI, so they don't want you paying for food and shelter out of a special needs trust. You can pay for that out of the ABLE account. So that was a fantastic question, and I'm really glad that you asked that. Did you mention a financial advisor earlier who can provide a consultation? So I'm not here as Consolidated Planning Group. I'm here as the leader for the Attention Deficit, Disorder Organization support group. We run Consolidated Planning Group. We are a holistic special needs financial planning firm. You can reach out to us on, on a separate channel, and we're happy to work with you. But we are our primary business, 100% basically, is working with families and special needs. That is our primary focus in special needs planning, because all of these things that we're talking about tonight, they really, really, really matter. Again, I come to you as a parent, and like I said, I have 2 kids with disabilities, and I'm still hopeful and optimistic, and I will always remain hopeful and optimistic, but we have to plan because we have some definitive disabilities and the jury's out. Our kids, and I always say this probably almost every, ADDA meeting, their brains are not fully formed until 26 years old. So what we're seeing right now is not what we're going to get, but we got to plan accordingly. So anyway, yes, we're happy to help you. You can check out our YouTube channel. I think Meredith will have our contact information in the email that goes out for this as well. So you can reach out to us that way. We're happy to help. Okay. So I think I talked about this already. What do I need to know about the ABLE accounts? One of the things that I didn't mention on the ABLE account is that you do have to, the disability did have to start prior to age 26, so not 22. Social Security Administration is disability had to start prior to 22, but to qualify for an ABLE account, the disability had to start prior to age 26. Again, we have complete webinars on our YouTube channel about ABLE accounts, special needs trust, guardianship, basically everything that we've talked about tonight. We have whole webinars dedicated to, so we can, it is my hope to educate you and put the tools and resources in your hands, so that way you can know about this, and you cannot feel like you're kind of, muddling through the dark with this. Because like I said, I felt frustrated when we were going through this, and I do this for a living. So we definitely want to help you there. So when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? So a special needs trust is going to preserve the benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. Guardianship can be applied for 6 months prior to the child turning 18. If your kids have, ADHD, anxiety, depression, some of the other mental health stuff, they probably don't need guardianship. There is a such thing as partial guardianship. In the state of Texas, there's something called a supported decision-making agreement. We definitely recommend a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney for all of our kids, especially if they're going off to college. So the healthcare power of attorney and the power of attorney may be something and all that you need, but you're going to want to work with a qualified attorney to prepare these documents. We're happy to make a referral. We work with all kinds of special needs attorneys all across the state of Texas. No matter where you are, we can make a referral for you on that. But do think about that. And one thing I need to mention here, because we were talking about college earlier, the FERPA, F-E-R-P-A, FERPA. These are all forms that the colleges and universities require to talk to you about your student that is 18 or older. If the FERPA is not on file, they won't talk to you. And I don't care if you're paying them $50,000 a year, they will not talk to you. So even though you have a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, these schools, if your child is going to school post 18, you're going to need to have a FERPA. Okay, so these are some of the things that we've talked about, a lot of things, and we're coming to an end here. But some of the things that we've talked about tonight, and again, we've got webinars on all of these things, but these are things that really should be on your special needs planning radar as you're thinking about transitioning your student. Everybody's situation is different. And gosh, I say God only knows what, how it's going to unfold for all of us, including me. But again, we really just suggest planning for the worst, hoping for the best, planning for the worst. And then, like I said, when everything works out and everything goes good, then your retirement is going to be much more lucrative, and maybe a lot more fun as well. So just, think about these things. And again, all of these webinars are out there on our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is Consolidated Planning Group. and you can check us out there. You can reach us at that number below. We have the Fort Bend ADDASR at gmail.com. We are sad that we haven't been meeting face to face. And, it's just, with the challenges with the pandemic, and I don't know, there's no end in sight. It doesn't seem, we were hopeful that we were going to get together face to face again this year, but we haven't yet, and we don't have plans yet for 2022. But our meetings, all of these meetings are free. We have different speakers every month. I am not the speaker. Usually I'm just the facilitator, and then we have other speakers that come in and talk to us about every possible topic that you could possibly imagine, from education, from parenting or punishment, from medication, just and finding the right doctor, and kind of some of the challenging behaviors and other things like that. So stay tuned. You will get you'll get an email, you'll get an invite. I'm a volunteer for this organization, so we don't spam you. We don't beg you to join. We think you should join, but we don't beg you to join. But just watch out for our other webinars. They typically are the last Tuesday of every month. And if you have a particular topic that would be helpful, helpful to you and your family, then certainly let us know. And we're happy to try to get a speaker for that particular topic. I hope all of you can hear me. I may be having some technical difficulty. I hear that somebody is saying that they can't hear me, so I apologize for that. I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care.